welcome back to another one. I'm sitting here with the heads today to this 59 Thunderbird, and my goal today is to get these chambers cleaned up and ready for the machine shop. Most of all these chambers are extremely dirty. There's rust, there's carbon deposits, there's grime that's been sitting there for 40 plus years. And it's unsightly, and it's really going to hurt the performance of the engine. Now I know when I take these into the machine shop, they're going to do a hot bath on these and get a lot of this grime and dirt and everything out of it. It's not going to get the rust off of it, unfortunately. So my goal today is to try and clean these chambers up as good as I can, as good as I know how. I've never done this before. This is something new to me, but I think it's really going to pay off if I do it now. I've gotten this chamber pretty much done for the most part. I've just got it cleaned up. As you can see, these are just cast chambers. They're not machined. This is basically all I'm going for. I'm not looking to do a port and polish. I'm not trying to get fancy with any of it. I'm just trying to get it cleaned up the best that I can before I take it into the machine shop. One thing that's really worried me when I looked at these heads, especially on this one back here, I believe that this was the number 5 cylinder where that valve was broke off, and you can see that there's quite a bit of rust in that chamber, and I believe this is another one that had water in it pretty bad. The rest of them look pretty okay, but these two chambers look really bad to me, and I'm worried about that rust and how far it ate into the head itself. So I'm going to try my best to get in here and polish all this stuff out, grind this stuff out, and just try to get it as smooth as I can. Now I've only got a couple tools with me today, 1/4-inch die grinders. I have one with a 3-inch extension and cartridge roll with the arbors. Then I have one with a burr bit on the end. I don't intend on using that burr bit very much. I did notice that there's some casting flash in some of the runners, specifically the exhaust runners. So I'm going to try to do my best to get that out. Probably have to use that burr bit, but for the most part I'm just going to use the cartridge rolls to smooth this stuff out as much as possible and try to do the least amount of damage as possible. Now if we take a look inside, this is the intake runner for this chamber. I've gotten it quite a bit smoother. I got all the rust. It's mostly carbon deposits on this one and just the grime and everything from sitting for 40 years or so. But this came out pretty good. There's some rough areas I still need to get to, but for the most part, this is pretty much done. I've worked on the intake chamber a little bit, and it came out pretty good. Like I said, I'm not trying to take any material out of there. I'm just trying to get it as smooth as I can, get all the dirt and grime and rust and everything else out of there. So this one came out pretty good. But let's go ahead and take a look at the exhaust chamber. All right, this is the exhaust chamber, and as you can see kind of back in that left corner, there's some pretty gnarly casting flash back in there that I'm going to have to try and get out. It's probably okay just the way that it is, but I'm going to go ahead and take that out anyway, because anything that I can take out of here is going to help the performance in the end. But like I said, I'm not after a performance head or anything like that. This is just the original heads that came off of this engine, and I'm just trying to smooth this stuff out the best that I can. All right, another 5 minutes later, and you can see I've got the majority of that flash out. Again, this is the exhaust runner. It's still not perfect. You know, I could probably spend another hour working on this chamber alone, but I really don't have the time for that. So we're just going to call this good and move on. To be on the safe side and just to be as careful as I can, mainly for practice reasons, I've got a set of old valves here that I'm just going to place inside. That way I can go ahead and clean up the top of these chambers and not really get into those seats. Now again, it's not going to be an issue when it comes to these heads, but this is mainly just practice for me, and it would be a good idea if you guys are going to do some porting and polishing, always use the old valves or a pair of valves just put them in there so that you don't get into those seats, because that's the most important part of this entire chamber. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to clean up the top of these chambers first, and then get inside the intake ports, all the intake ports, and then I'll come back and do the intake runners, and then we'll get inside, clean up the exhaust ports, and then come back, finish up with the exhaust runners. So I've completed the bottom head here, and you can definitely tell the difference. This is about 2 hours worth of work, and I've gotten inside each one of the chambers, each one of the ports, and it came out pretty good. There was a lot of casting flash, especially in the exhaust runners, but I managed to get the majority of that stuff out. But it does look pretty good compared to what I still haven't finished yet. So let's take a look at the intake runners. You can see it's not exactly polished, but it's definitely a lot smoother than it was before. I got all that carbon buildup out of there. I got a lot of just the rough parts of the casting ground down, and I wouldn't say it's polished, but it's, you know, it's much better than it was, smoother than it was, so that should help out with some of the performance. You could probably stand to spend some more time on this one. It looks pretty rough still. But the runners are looking pretty smooth. Let's take a look at the exhaust ports. So here's the exhaust runners, and as you can tell, still, those look pretty good, pretty smooth. You know, it's all just cast heads. None of this was machined, so there's a lot of rough area inside each one of these runners, but it's just going to be what it is because it's not going to be perfect. But it is much better than it was before. I'm pretty happy with it. And I'm not going for, you know, total performance here, so I'm just trying to smooth some of the area out, getting the carbon buildup off, get the rust that's been sitting for a while out. So there you have it. One down, one to go. Well, a couple days has gone by, and I finally got the second head finished. It looks pretty good, came out pretty good. Within that couple days, I had some time to do some research. It's been so cold that I haven't wanted to be out here at all. But I was able to do some research, and come to find out, when I take these into the shop, they are going to bake them and get all of the grease and crud and grime and everything off. It's just going to turn it to dust, basically. They'll blow that off and then hot tank it, put it in a hot bath, and get it all cleaned up. And then after that, as I understand it, they're going to go ahead and bead blast everything or hit it with some steel shot. So as it turns out, I probably didn't have to do any of this. But I don't regret it because it gave me the opportunity to really get inside these heads and look, check out the chambers and the runners and everything. I got a lot of that flash out that would likely hinder the performance a little bit. So I don't regret any of it. But in hindsight, I guess I really didn't have to do it. So I've never really been inside of an engine before. I've replaced heads and whatnot, but I've never rebuilt an engine. I've never been to a machine shop to have them do any kind of work. So I guess it's a lesson learned. I've got my seats, hardened seats, both for the exhaust and the intake. I also have my valves, exhaust and intake valves. So I'm going to take all this stuff to the machine shop tomorrow, have them do a valve job, have them resurface the head as well as the exhaust side. And as I was saying before, I've got 4 bolts that are stuck in the exhaust side that I need to have them remove because I just couldn't do it. Couldn't get them out. Well, I got the heads into the shop as of yesterday, and I've still got the block sitting there for a very specific reason. I'll go over that here in a minute. But right now, I've got this crank set up. I want to go ahead and take a really good look at it. I'm going to get it cleaned up. I'm going to take a look at all these journals, clean out the oil galleys, and just see exactly where we're at. See if this is something that I can do here in the garage, or if I need to go ahead and take this in and have the shop do the work for me. Everything looks pretty good on the surface, so I'm thinking that I might be able to get away with just a quick polish, but I want to go ahead and measure everything and make sure. I do want to address something real quick. After taking a closer look at everything, the bore on the block, the main bearings, the rod bearings, and all of that, I did find out, in fact, that somebody has been inside this engine and it has been rebuilt. You can see here, this is one of the rod bearings. You could see the 0.010. On top of the crank here, you could see that it's been stamped 0.010. So that confirms to me that the crank has been turned down and the block has been bored out. So somebody has in fact rebuilt the engine. That would also explain why the connecting rods were not in order. Now that I have everything cleaned up, the oil galleys are looking really good. So I'm going to go ahead and take a measurement of all the journals. On all I have is a set of calipers. I don't have micrometers. I know that would probably work a lot better, but you got to use the tools that you have. This is what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and measure everything, and as long as we're within a couple thousandths, we should be good. I should be able to just give this a polish. Like I said, everything looks good. All the journals look pretty good. There's nothing scarred. There's nothing with deep grooves or anything like that. So I'm praying that we can just get away with a polish here. All right, I've got everything measured and everything looks pretty good. Let's look at the results here. You can see that everything is pretty close. There's not a lot of variance until you get to this journal here. That would hold number 3 and number 7 connecting rod, and we're about 2/1000ths off. But I don't think that's much of a big deal. I think we can go ahead and shave that down. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to just give this thing a nice polish. All right, so I have got all my material here. I've got 1000 grit sandpaper. I've got some WD-40, and then I've got some strips cut into particular pieces along with a shoelace. I've got some journals that are 1 3/4 inches, some that are 1.5 inches, and some that are 1 1/4 inches. So I have my pieces cut to correspond to those journals, and all I'm going to do basically is wet down that sandpaper with the WD-40, spray generously onto the journals, wrap the sandpaper around, wrap the shoelace around, and then spend about 2 or 3 minutes on each journal, and that should give me a pretty fine polish. Now this is nothing different than anything else that you guys have probably seen before. I'm sure you've seen it a million times. This is going to be the same as anything else you've seen. Well, that was an absolute mess, I'll tell you what, but I got it done, and it looks a whole lot better than it did, so I'm pretty happy with that. Still not perfect. It's never going to be when you're doing stuff at home like this, but it's as good as it's going to get, and I'm happy with it, so we're going to go with it. Now that I got that crank finished, I want to turn my attention over to the motor. Obviously, I haven't gotten into the shop yet, and there's a reason for that. I still have a lot to get cleaned up on this thing. I got gaskets, oil pan gasket, need to get the freeze plugs out and all that, a couple bolts, whatnot. But the main reason that I still have this, I want to use this as a template to build an engine test stand. This is obviously going to be the first motor that I have on that stand, so I want to use this as the template, but I want to make it modular so that I can put any motor on there and test it before I actually put it into a vehicle. I should have it in the shop this week. I've already spoke to the gentleman, and he's just waiting for me to bring it in. But like I said, I just need to use this as the template to go ahead and build a couple things for that engine test stand. So I'm going to go ahead and take the time and get this dressed up and ready. Get these freeze plugs out of here, a couple of the other plugs and bolts and whatnot, gaskets and things like that. I'm not going to bore you guys with that. That's something that you can do on your own. But that's where we're at. I think we're going to leave it here. There's plenty more to come. Getting ready to jump on this body as soon as I get this in the shop. So I really appreciate your guys' support. Keep liking the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next one.